So you'll want to get around to the point where you're ready to import in some assets that you might want to work with within After Effects. And so this is the grand sort of thing that After Effects does, is it lets you bring in things like video footage or you know, illustrated elements or any of that kind of thing, and then lets you kind of mess around with them and animate them, right? And so you can kind of add like an explosion on top of some video footage you shot that doesn't have any explosions in it at all, right? So that would be uh, kind of the way that After Effects works, what it's meant to do. So if you go to up here to File, you'll see that you have options for importing things, right? All kinds of options that come through here. You can import multiple files, placeholders, all these different things. But for what we're going to want to do, we're going to want to just go ahead and import multiple files here, right? And then you want to go to the place where you've stashed all your assets, right? So from example, I have my thumb drive here. I've got it in my After Effects folder. I've got the art assets, and I can just click and shift click all of these. And then so I have like movie footage that I've shot, some scans of artwork. I'm going to use some abstracted kind of like elements that I think will work well for this project that I'm going to demonstrate. So you can go ahead and just click on all that, click open, and now you'll see that um, it will bring in all of the sometimes I just click through that kind of stuff just so I don't have to fight with it too much. So there you go. So now if you look, you'll see that you have all these different like elements and items that are in there alongside the two comps that we had already made, right? So there's different sort of ways you can bring in items. If you want to, you can actually just go to your thing and just drag the whole folder in, and it's going to say you know, it's going to give you some trouble sometimes, different kinds of formats that you're trying to bring in, but sometimes you can bring in the whole folder. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can import stuff into the the sort of project panel here, right, which is the important thing. So again, like all this does is then what After Effects said is it took one of my images or my videos, and it just created one gigantic composition out of that. So if I look over here, I've got one that's called Blue, and it's all of the stuff that I just brought in kind of came in one spot. So if it's confusing, you can always get rid of a comp or some footage just by clicking and dragging here, and it'll delete it for you and kind of clean things up. But remember that this is a linking program, right? So right now After Effects has made a link from here out to that folder where that video footage is at. It hasn't actually like added anything into the actual program itself. So all that this After Effects program is a bunch of math and code that's linking out. And so it's important that now that I've moved this in, I don't change the name of anything. I don't go back into my thumb drive and like fool around with this and like change any of this or move this thing out of this folder into a different folder. Maybe a good example would be just to show you what happens if I do it. So if I click there, I do that. Now it's going to tell me After Effects doesn't know where that thing went. Like you moved it and I can't find it, right? So so you just don't want to mess with anything. Don't change any names. Just make sure that you leave like everything kind of exactly where it is and keep moving forward. So then, you know, you want to make sure you save this. So always hit Command S constantly. It's always my advice, just to kind of constantly be upgrading your so you save it all the time. And now we're ready to actually start working with this stuff, and we've imported in some components that we can use. So remember too that like that this stuff, some of these are still static images, and some of them are actually movies or film footage, right? Video footage. So you know, you just got to make sure you know the difference. Sometimes PSDs will come in a little different form than like a JPEG will. So just good to know that there's differences in file formats as well. So, but for example, to get moving, one of the things, or get started, one of the things I could do is just open up one of my comps. So I'll just go with here. I'll just double click comp 1, make sure that one's open down here. And now I can start adding in items to that comp. So if I want to, I can, you know, grab like this thing and drag it in. And now this element, this still image that I have is going to float around in this space, and I can resize it if I want to by grabbing these handles. If I want to distort it, I can stretch it out, or I can hold the shift key down and that'll keep it from distorting. And so now I have this item that's in the in After Effects, and I can mess around with it and play around with it, right? The other thing that you can always do would be to put a video in there. So if you have like some video of some sort, like this one, I can drag that in and drop it into the timeline, and now you'll see that video, which is shot kind of, its orientation was more like an iPhone camera, right? So if I don't like that, I can rotate it by clicking on the rotate tool up here, and then just click on these edges, and I can rotate it around and place it in the picture frame the way I want it to look. And then I can go back to this black arrow selection tool here and resize it so it fills up the square. So now if I push play, that footage is going to be there alongside the standard kind of flat image that I have, and it just all depends on whether I've stacked one thing on top of the other, like which order they're in. So that's kind of layer orders that you might want to think about. And so now the trick would be to figure out what to do with these things. And you'll notice that there's a little, I call these twirl downs. And so if you click on the twirl down, you'll see that there is more and more kind of like, you can go deep into every item that you could transform within that item. So this is the static still image here. I'll make it a little bigger so we can kind of see it. Go ahead and make it fit. So here's the item, right? And I can use this arrow tool to like move that item around. And if I ever make a mistake, I can hit Command Z and that'll undo it. But I can, move this item around, the sort of smoke image around, and I can go ahead and change different components to it. So if I want to change the opacity, I can just make sure I have the opacity selected here and then just slide these numbers down, and that'll make it more transparent, or I can crank the opacity up. I can change the rotation just by sliding back and forth. I can change scale same way. Where it is on the X and the Y axis can be changed with by these sliders too. So all of this stuff is like really, really helpful and useful as you get used to working in After Effects as well. And then the last thing would just be, in a video file, I can transform all the same things, size, opacity, but I can also change the audio. So if I wanted to crank the audio up or down, I can. And if I don't want the audio like really there at all, I can just turn it off by clicking that little sound button, and it'll just make the audio muted. And then if you wanted to see like your waveform, so you could actually see like the sound itself, you can turn that on here. Again, it'd be twirled down under audio, go all the way in, and then you can turn the waveform on or off. So it's up to you. For my purposes, I don't want that audio in there, so I would just mute that and turn it off. So that should give you enough. Try importing in some things and playing around with, placing them and stacking them in order. Or try changing some of these variables that you can transform and change, and see what you can learn.